Okay, welcome all to the IVRPA presentation with Greg Downing. This is one that I have been looking forward to a lot. Greg, you are an absolute legend in this field, and the opportunity to spend some time with you and see what you've been doing is something I've been looking forward to mightily. Um, for those who are in the audience, if you wish to ask a question, I suggest that the easiest way to do it will actually be in chat. And then make sure that when you do your chat, in the blue bar that is above where you're typing, make sure it goes out to everybody. You can click at the drop down and make sure it goes to everybody. Otherwise, only the panelists will see that, what you're typing. So IVRPA, the International VR Professionals Association, is the only international association for VR creatives, as opposed to primarily the corporate interests. As such, we like to present information that you are not likely to see elsewhere, including on YouTube, because the subject matter is directed directly to people like us. And this is one of the advantages that we present in our educational series. This is just one of many webinars that is available free on the day of presentation, and then is available to any paid member on demand through the website. So if you have not joined and want to see the entire catalog of presentations, I encourage you to join. At $50, it truly is a steal, in my humble opinion. Okay, I think that is all the chin wagging I need to do. Greg, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, as you know, your background and such, but take it away, my friend.
All right, great. Well, good morning, everyone. So let's see, just a little bit about me and my background. I've been involved with this organization for many, many years. I think at one point I was on the board, which was about the time we did the name change. So I'm thinking that's maybe, I guess maybe 2002. Um, so I started back in the late 90s when QuickTime VR took off. And I was working at Apple on their helpline at the time, got exposed to all of that early stuff, fell in love, quit my job, and just started traveling the world doing photography. It was a good lesson in life of follow your heart, and then you can, you know, when you just go and do what you want to do most, there might be someone there willing to pay you. So I decided to travel the world and do photography, and I got hired while I was on the road to continue traveling the world doing photography. After that, I worked for a company called RealViz, which made some early panoramic stitching software and the first photogrammetry software. Then I worked in visual effects for film for a while, and eventually started a company with Eric Hansen. And today we are 17 or 18 years into that business, and still alive. So when Lauren asked me to give a talk, I had posted a couple of links on LinkedIn, and he said, this would make a fun talk for the organization. Could you give a talk on this? And I didn't really have enough material for an entire talk just based on those couple of links. So I said, well, let's kind of roll it up into a theme. So over my career, I've gotten to do lots of work with different Indigenous people around the world, and help tell their stories, help either tell their stories or help them tell their stories. So I wanted to share a few of those projects that fit into that theme. So with that, I'll get started on the presentation. I'll share my screen here. Okay, so I'll be talking a bit about empowering Indigenous storytelling through VR. And this isn't just VR. This is all kind of the whole area of spatial computing, etc. So I've already told you a little bit about my background. I've been involved in VR since the very early days. Eric and I did an installation in 2006 for the national parks virtual reality. But I've been deeply involved in dome theater, full dome, and other areas. We've also focused a lot on doing extremely high resolution, which is why the company's name is hyperacuity. So hyperacuity is a medical term that is someone who has better senses than normal. So someone who has better than 20/20 vision or better hearing than normal, or in some way their senses are superior to the rest of the population. So that's why the company name is hyperacuity, and our theme is oversampling the world. So we're trying to scan and explore the world at an even higher resolution than you can see. So we're not only going beyond what you can do with a headset, but actually beyond what human vision can see and acquire, and then creating tools for storytelling within those environments. But our real mission is to convey the sense of awe, wonder, and discovery through interactive exploration. So these are some of our previous adventures. We've got a lot of VR projects in here, a lot of cultural heritage projects, working with different types of scientists, archaeologists, geologists, artists, computer scientists, musicians, even on films, done work for films as well. We've been lucky, we've gotten several awards doing that work. And this is kind of our bread and butter, is more of these 6 degree of freedom, 3D scanning environments where you can move around inside the environment. On the top half, we've got 2 projects that I did for the Smithsonian Museum. One is for the American Art Museum, and the other is for the Renwick Museum. And across the bottom, you can also see some work that I did at USC, helping out with the scientific diver program. So just have those play while I continue to talk about those. So there we were doing underwater photogrammetry, so doing it on scuba. I love doing these kind of extreme projects, extreme environments. I'm a member of the Explorers Club and Adventurers Club, and do my best to kind of bring this media to new places so that we can bring our audiences to new places, and places they may never end up going themselves. Okay, so where are we going today? So today we're going to talk about some work we did with the Awavena, which is in Brazil along the Amazon. It's along Rio Gregory, for those of you who know the Amazon. It's in the state of Acre, which is, you can see where the arrow is pointing there. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some work I did with the Yirrkala, which is in northern Australia. And finally, a project that Eric Hansen and I did with the Navajo. So the projects we did with the Awavena was a project called Awavena, and that is a virtual reality project. It's unique for a number of reasons. It's unique because it mixes 3 degrees of freedom with 6 degrees of freedom. So I know my audience here probably knows this, but if anyone watches this that doesn't know the difference between those, and 3 degrees of freedom, you've only got pan and tilt. So it's kind of like your head is on a swivel. So you can look anywhere you want, but you can't move through the environment. And then 6 degrees of freedom is where you can stand up and walk through an environment, and you can lean to the left, to the right, crouch down, look under and over things. So we mixed these, which was kind of an interesting process. with the Yirrkala, that was an interesting project where I was asked to go and train a native community of artists. So we train them in panoramic photography, photogrammetry, and the use of Unity 3D. So we also, of course, played around with VR quite a bit, but that's not the only output once you kind of get into the spatial computing world. And finally, I'll talk about an older project that I did with Eric and the Navajo Nation called Pull of the Moon. And that was made for both virtual reality and full dome. So I guess if I were to classify these with Awavena VR, that was directed by Lynette Walworth. So she was kind of the lead storyteller and communicating with the Yawanawa and building that up. I was the cinematographer and a technical consultant on that. Yirrkala is telling, kind of training them in the tools so that they can tell their own stories. And Navajo was a project that Eric and I directed, but it was done with a lot of collaboration with the Indigenous community. So when I think about working with Indigenous communities and which is, a lot of it is documenting their cultural heritage and their backgrounds. It is also important to keep in mind that all of these people are also modern people. So they have one foot in the ancient world and one foot in the modern world. But their heritage is the part that we often want to tell stories about. So you've got the built heritage, which I have a lot of experience with. So working with archaeologists and working with the native people. In that case, you're documenting things like structures, places, and artifacts. So the tools that I employ for that are, first of all, photogrammetry, which is something I'm doing since the late 90s. Laser scanning, other methods of 3D scanning, structured light, radiance fields. One of the pieces I worked on was radiance field is a general class. So within radiance fields, you've got NERFs, the neural radiance fields, and you've got Gaussian splats, which is very popular right now. And of course, you have light fields, which was the piece that I did with Google on it's called Welcome to Light Fields. You can get it free on the Steam platform. And of course, photography also works. For living heritage, we've got subjects like ceremonies, dancing, singing, storytelling, and of course, in some cases, the wildlife that's in the environment people are reacting to and that's important to their culture. So for these, because it involves movement and it's something that largely you don't want to do in a studio. Largely, we want to do this within the context of the culture and in important places. So then you're talking about things like motion capture and relating that via CG characters or CG elements, depth and spatial video. So now iPhones, of course, have spatial video built in using their little flashing LiDAR sensor, but there's a number of other sensors that have been doing that with structured light before that, and just laser speckle patterns and things like that. Then we've got spherical video and, of course, stereo video and stereospherical video and kind of all the permutations that we've got. Now, I didn't include in this volumetric capture as well, just because it's something that requires a studio to get started in. And when you're working with Indigenous communities, they are the ones that are really bringing value in the story. So something that we always try to do is allow them control of their representation, how they're represented on screen, and make sure that we are telling their stories accurately. And that's probably the biggest ethics question when working with Indigenous communities. All right, so let's jump into Awavena. Awavena is storytelling in VR. It's the story of Hushahu, who is a shaman within the Yawanawa culture, and she's the first female shaman. Uh, Now, there's a lot of backstory and other details about the culture that are really interesting that are not in this film. You know, the film has to be self-contained, and the story is about her and her process of becoming a shaman. It's an intense process to become a shaman in the Yamanawan culture. So they spend 18 months going through the process, and it involves taking lots of plant medicines that are very intense and intensive training. So they're trained by older shaman. Um, she was trained by Tata, who was uh, an older shaman that the entire culture actually went through this. This is not part of the story, but went through a soda straw of one man. So they were during World War II when the U.S. Needed lots of rubber to fight World War II, rubber for tires and all kinds of materials that were involved in war. There was a lot of pressure to generate rubber around the world, and so rubber plantations went throughout Brazil, and unfortunately did some really horrible things. So they took the land from people to build rubber plantations, slash and burn the forest, and they also enslaved the people. And Tata is interesting as a character because he is one of the his parents had the foresight of actually training him in the ancient ways and training him in the language. So the entire culture owes this huge debt of gratitude to Tata because he was able to preserve the language and the plant medicine practices, etc. So he was a very revered figure. And unfortunately, he passed in the very beginning of our film. So we have a few shots of him, but the story was mainly about the story that Hushahu went through, and working with Tata and being trained by Tata. Um, and the process involved uh, taking uni, which is what their name for ayahuasca, which is a plant medicine that brings on visions. And so we needed to represent that in the process as well. So she would take that every single day, and the shamanistic uh, training begins with taking a plant medicine called mula, which is something we don't know what it is. This is a secret within their community that they don't share outside of the community. But it's a plant medicine that is a powerful visionary medicine that is permanent. So you take it once, and it permanently affects you, along with many other plant medicines that they were taking. So there's a wild snuff that they use. There's a number of medicines that are important to their spiritual practices. So we were documenting that, and it was really important that she was the first female to go through this. There was within the culture there was a lot of concern about could um, a female even go through this process and survive, and or would something really bad happen to the community? They did this, so it took a lot of daring on Tata's part because this is a 10,000-year-old culture, and as far as we know, there haven't been any female shamans before this, but there was, I think in the bounce back of their culture that there were lots of social problems that had developed, and one of the interesting things is that this expansion of women's roles within the culture, both in as shaman, but also as eventually as chiefs and other roles within the community, really balanced out a lot of what was going on in the community. But watch the film. and you'll get the complete story. So just a little bit about the people. So it was directed by Lynette Walworth. It was produced by Nicole Noonan, and also Toshka and Laura Yawanawa. So Toshka was the chief of the village. And Laura is his wife, the shaman, Hushahu, of course. I was a cinematographer, technical advisor. So I played several roles in the creation of it. We had Dr. Anya Salih, and she's a scientist that specializes in fluorescence. So we wanted to represent a lot of the hallucinogenic experience, not by creating something that wasn't real, but by modifying what does exist in their environment and enhancing it and finding that hidden vision that exists within the real world. And she's actually discovered many of the fluorescent colors and has named them. She normally works on coral reefs. She was very curious to get out into the jungle, see what fluorescent plants and animals we could find there. Mars Wong did the Unity development, and Brian Frager was a producer for post-production, and Francisco Alamendra and Nelson Porto were my faithful camera assistants. They were fantastic. They did actually several of the shoots independently as well before I arrived. They're Brazilian, so they were pretty close. So they went and they did the initial scout, which we were hugely thankful for. And they also got our only footage of Tata before he passed. So just a little bit about where this is. This is, a little closer view of the map of where the Yawanawa are. Now I took a huge amount of gear for this. So we had a very small, lightweight team that we took there. So that meant that I was traveling by myself with way too much gear. So this is what I was going through the airport. Unfortunately, I had a huge number of layovers. The cheapest tickets we took had me going through southern Chile and other cities in Brazil. And so very long flights, lots of transfers. And I had to figure out how to move all of this stuff myself. Of course, this is all valuable equipment that you're nervous about. You're in a foreign country in an airport trying to move around. So I found when we had to transfer, I would take each of these carts and I would move them about 10 or 20 feet and then go back and get the other one, move it 10 or 20 feet and do that for, the half-mile travel across the airport. Lots of difficult. I don't recommend this at all. If you go to the bathroom or something, you can't because you've got all this equipment that you can't leave unattended. So that was a super tricky thing to do. So what's in those bags? So I traveled with a Nokia Ozo. That was the camera we were able to get our hands on at the time. We were shooting a lot of low light footage. So we wanted to do an A7S rig for the low light. So that was a spherical array. So the Ozo was used primarily for the daylight scenes. And, in my experience, I've shown our work, a lot of the stuff we've done in the past, to even stereographers and people with a lot of stereo experience in general. I find like if you have some really great stereo shots, people aren't really upset if there's a few mono shots in there. So to get something that's really interesting in mono, like some of the stuff that was happening with ceremony, it was worth it to bring the A7S and drop down to mono. The Nokia Ozo, of course, is spherical stereo. A little noisy, overheats quite a bit. It's not the ideal camera, not the camera I would choose today, but at the time, that was a pretty good option for us. We also brought structure sensors, which are depth sensors. Projects a little infrared laser pattern and then uses an infrared camera to pick up the pattern to get the depth, and then the coarse color image to get the texture on the surface. DSLR with various lenses because we were doing photogrammetry, so we needed the whole photogrammetry ground-based kit. We had UV lighting for the fluorescence photography. And for the fluorescence photography, capturing fluorescence is difficult because it's a very low light phenomenon. So we used a pair of Canon ME20Fs and Atmos recorders to record the data. Those were really incredible cameras. If you ever have a low light situation, I believe this is the most sensitive low light camera that you can get, and it's beautiful. The imagery from it's really beautiful. It's only 1080p, and the reason it's so sensitive is because it has a very large pixels, so it picks up, it can gather a huge amount of light. We also had an Inspire drone for the aerial photogrammetry, a Paracosm PX80 handheld LiDAR, and they were generous enough to let us take their prototype of that device. So if you see it in the images, you'll see that looks quite a bit different than the commercial shipping device. And that's because at the time, I think there were only 2 or 3 of these in the world. And it was also, I believe, the first uh, LiDAR SLAM combination. So it had a fisheye lens that it would use SLAM to figure out where the LiDAR was as you were walking around with it. So then it has a LiDAR puck, like one of those little spinning pucks that does a sinusoidal scan. So that basically the laser is going up and down as it's spinning. So it gives you kind of a cylindrical scan. But then when you walk through a space, you can kind of get the entire space that way. So we use that for a lot of the jungle scenes because dense jungle, largely filigree and plants and stuff like that don't scan so well using photogrammetry. And then we had some ambisonic microphones, hot lights, etc. So not only was it a long flight and then a couple of days of driving, and then it was a full day of going down the Amazon in a boat with all of our equipment through lots of obstructions. All the Amazon is constantly getting covered with debris and branches and stuff. So some of the guys travel with chainsaws so that they can cut through the debris as they go. And you can see that the props on these, there we've got the director in the front, the scientist behind her, followed by producers. And then you can see the props are really high in the water so that you don't end up hitting the bottom and all of that debris. So a full day of travel. So it was almost as much time traveling to get there as we had there. We shot the film in 5 days, which I think was, we were super, super lucky. We got great material all the time, and that was lucky. I would have never thought that we could get that much good material that quickly. So this is the bridge when you approach the village of the Yawanawa. So this is what it looks like when you arrive, the welcoming bridge. This is the PX80. So when we arrived, and you can see the homes are kind of, there's lots of homes built up in trees. There's poisonous snakes, deadly poisonous snakes. There's insects, all kinds of reasons you don't want to lie down on the ground. So several of the homes and kind of central living places were built up on platforms, many of them, not all of them, but many of them in the trees. So the first day, which, when you've only got 5 days to capture, it's very difficult to give up a day. But the first day was showing the village, showing the community all of our equipment and how it worked. So everybody kind of understood what we're doing, what was going on, helping them understand it. And this was super, super important to get everyone in the village to understand what we're doing and not only feel comfortable with it, but become participants in the creation of the piece. So it was a lot of long talks and about the culture and about what was going on. And also at the time, Lynette was spending lots of time with Hushahu, also getting a better understanding of the story and the places so that we could come up with, all the shots that we needed. She had a pretty good idea before we left, but there was still a lot of finalizing of the story going on at this point. And just for the technically minded here, across the top, at the very top of this is where we have our fisheye lens that's used for the tracking of where this laser scanner is. So the laser's spinning around inside there and making the sinusoidal pattern. And of course, we had feedback on the display. So this is more of just showing people how the equipment worked. So explaining the spinning and the that is Tashka, and he is the chief of the tribe. And he's, I was saying that the culture has one foot in the modern world and one in the ancient. He is the chief of the tribe, but he also, when he was young, he was really sick, and he had both, I believe it was yellow fever and malaria, and so his father had some warriors carry him to some priests that then took him to modern hospitals, and he ended up going to Oxford and studying computer science, but he kept coming back to visit his family and his cultures the whole time. So he's a highly educated man, as well as being the chief of the tribe. It was really important that we not only show them how the equipment works, but actually show them results. So we did some shooting at first, and once they looked at the VR and understood that we were doing is when they really became active participants in the creation of this film, and took control over their representation. And the result was so much better once they understood. They jumped in and got involved in the art direction. Initially, they often wear, they're wearing t-shirts and shorts because, it's very hot there. And so in their daily dress, they do wear some traditional dress, but it's kind of a mix. It's a mix of modern and ancient dress. And but when they have high ceremonies, when it's an important ceremony, they always, just like maybe in the United States, you might have people going to church on Sunday wearing some of their finest clothes. What they feel are their finest clothes are the traditional clothing. So they really wanted it to be high ceremony, and they also wanted to make sure that it was in their most valued sacred spaces. So the initial shots that we did of a ceremony was, not in this kind of ideal condition, but once they understood what we were doing, and could see the results, they jumped in and got actively involved, and that was fantastic. Our result was so much better, and I feel like a better representation of what's unique and interesting about their culture. One of the things that we showed was the children's face painting. So before in ayahuasca, the ayahuasca ceremonies and many of the other ceremonies, all the girls in the community get together and they do face painting. They have this berry there that's they actually export and is used by makeup companies for lipstick, but they cultivate it, and it's got this incredible red color. So we had an important scene that we were filming showing the face painting, but they were also just, this is something they were just doing. So we, of course, set up the camera. This film, one of the things that's interesting about it is you're doing documentary in this new media, and all the capture techniques require you can't really do a documentary in the traditional manner. You have to kind of have the documentary value of creating the most realistic seem possible, but you can't do the thing that you might do in traditional film documentaries where you just become kind of a fly on the wall. It does require some setup, ways to, get things away from the camera that, when you're working with a spherical camera, it's really hard to see things unless they're really close. You want to be very close to the action. It's kind of hard to ignore the camera that's happening. So there are some caveats when you're making virtual reality documentaries, and some ways in which you have to flex around this new media. So this was one moment where I had a little bit of time to kind of jump around with a regular camera and just kind of take photos of what was going on in the scene. So this kind of just gives you a little slice of life of what it's like there in the jungle. And you can see there's like a henna type paint that they use as well for the face painting. So this was a lot of fun to see and participate. And everyone was really interested. I loved this photo because to me this is the next generation of virtual reality film creators. So I thought that was a great opportunity. She was super interested in how all the technology worked. So that was fun to share. A lot of challenges in working in the jungle. A lot of steam, a lot of overheating. Everything overheated. We even had a problem with, because it's so hot and you're sweaty, you're touching the camera body to move it around, and your sweat gets on it, and the salt from your sweat attracts butterflies. So we were continuously cleaning everything because as soon as we start the camera, butterflies would go and try to land, start walking all over the lenses, etc. So we had a lot of butterfly herding going on. And on the left there, you can see our audio guy. He was fantastic. He used lots of really interesting audio technology. In addition to the ambisonic, we also had people mic'd, and we had so they had like lavaliers, and he did a lot of interesting work with contact microphones. So putting contact microphones on wood so that you could hear the insects crawling inside the wood, and he did a really beautiful job of all these unique captures in the jungle. And finally, we were filming the creation of the ayahuasca. So this is the vine that it comes from. And they would smash it, and it would very quickly oxidize and go from this yellow color to this amazing rich orange color within maybe 20 seconds. It would completely transform. So you can see some of that here. And finally, this is a bit of the ceremony going on. Now, when it came to representing what the visions looked like, I was mentioning that we wanted to take the real world and abstract it. A lot of times the way hallucinations are presented in media, it's kind of like Alice in Wonderland, like you're seeing this stuff that's not really there, which is not really a representation of what happens. So this is some of the resulting footage. And now here, what I've got is a little bit of video showing what it's like with normal light. So we would go out at night to do the fluorescent photography. And this is what it looks with just the UV light on it. And then what we would do is, this is a yellow filter. So this is just the regular light with the yellow filter. And now this is all three pieces put together. So this is the yellow filter over the camera. So it's blocking out all the blue light. And then it's only getting the parts that are fluorescing. So it's blocking the blue and only getting the fluorescence. So these are some of the plants and animals that we were filming. And we were really fortunate. So Anya would go out during the day, and she would find plants and animals, or excuse me, go out during the night. While we were shooting during the day, every night she would go out and she would take a UV light and hunt for these plants and animals that would fluoresce and bring them out. And then we, on our final night there, we finally got around to the shoot of the fluorescence. Now, the really tricky thing that we ran into from a camera perspective, one of the reasons I don't have a lot of BTS of this, is that the bag containing our heavy duty tripods that would support two of these cinema cameras for the stereo didn't arrive. So the only tripod we had, we were using this little spindly, almost like something you use for an iPhone or something, really lightweight tripod with branches gaffer taped to reinforce the legs. It was a horrible squirrely setup, but we had to improvise because the airline lost one of our bags and there was no place to buy tripods along the way. So that was a very tricky part of the process. We were also doing a little drone photography going over the jungle. So we're using the Inspire to fly over the jungle to get a little bit of detail for a model. So this didn't need a huge amount of detail because it was miniaturized. So the way this was used was that in the very beginning of the piece, there's a book that you're presented with, and it has a painting that was painted by a Yawanoma artist of the river bend and where they live. And then we have the 3D model of that area lift out of the book to start the piece. Also, to another thing that we use to represent the plant medicine visions is 3D point clouds. Some of the data collected with a laser scanner.
Was trying to do.
So this is a little screen capture of the VR. What you'll notice, one of the things to notice is that this part is not only sixed off in that you can move around a bit. Get the video to play again. We use the heading in the VR headset, so we've got a ray coming out of the headset going forward, and that ray actually interacts with the 3D point cloud. So you get this subtle interaction that you can see the perturbation of the point cloud. And that was inspired by something that the Yawanoma told us, is that this, when you're having this experience, you're watching the jungle, but the jungle is also watching you, and it becomes part of you and linked to you. So you become very aware of your connection to the jungle. And so this is something that we want to represent technically. And finally, we did some scanning of Hushahu as well. So this is some of that using that. So going in process and actually doing the scanning. We're handing the scanner off here because we're trying not to block the light that's on the subject. But we had to bring all of these hot lights out there to do stuff like this, and also to film a lot of the ceremony, etc. There was not a lot of power available. Charging was very difficult. There was usually they kept a generator that they ran for an hour or two every night, right after sunset, and then they shut it off. So one of the exciting things about this project was that we won an Emmy. It was during the pandemic. So this is what getting an Emmy during the pandemic looked like. You watched it on a special app on an Apple TV, which really did not make it feel very real. You can see there in the lower left, in the upper right-hand corner of that window is Lynette, just seconds before they make the announcement. So it finally seemed real a few weeks later when the statue arrived, and I got to go to the beach and go with friends and my partner there to really make it feel real, to actually be around people. So finally, here's some images. I'll paste this into the notes, the link to Awavena on Viveport. This is something that you can download and view for free on Viveport. One of the wonderful, actually, before I mention that, you can do it with a Quest. It requires a little special setup. You have to set up Quest Link and then install Steam on a PC and actually connect it to a PC to view it. Also, there's a little weird caveat in that there's a codec being used in the video decoding that requires a special codec from Microsoft. So you have to download it from the Microsoft store, and they charge 99 cents for it. So you have to get that codec, but then you can view the piece. So another culture that I worked with was the Yirrkala, and they're in northwestern Australia. It's an Aboriginal tribe, and you can see there all the kids were very excited about using the VR. The kids were the most fun to film with this, and this all started a very weird way. So I got a call from some folks on the behalf of the State Department, the U.S. State Department, which you associate more with international policy and how the United States interacts with other countries. But along with that, they're also in charge of just making sure that the U.S. is well regarded internationally. So they do a lot that we hear about a lot less in the U.S., but apparently internationally you hear more about, which is what the U.S. is doing to help people in different cultures and share the stuff that we know with them. So they contacted me, and what they really wanted out of this was they asked me to go to this remote tribe and teach them techniques for capturing stuff for virtual reality. And what they wanted out of this was tweets to kind of share that they were doing all of this. So it seemed very strange to me that what they really got out of it was a couple of tweets and some good press from that. But I was more than happy to oblige. I thought it was fantastic that they were doing this, and that the Yirrkala got to kind of expand their knowledge base, and I got to go and learn from them about their culture. So that was really exciting and fantastic. And they have this media center there that's really great. So one of the reasons this particular tribe was selected is because they have some very successful artists in the tribe, and they've done a really amazing job of leveraging their culture and their art and exporting it and creating an income for the village. So we've got all of this beautiful artwork and the creation of didgeridoos that they sell. They are also famous for their bark paintings. So they cut the bark off a tree and they unfold it. This is an ancient tradition, and then they paint it. And some of the bark paintings that are done by the women there are collected by the Louvre and collected by the Smithsonian and private collectors. And so these are paintings that they can sell, and their extended family can live for years on the sale of some of the paintings. So they've got a very successful export of the paintings, their basket weaving, and then they also have a music studio. So they produce a lot of music. And one of the more interesting musics that they produce is song lines. And song lines, so you can see that they do modern music as well, but they also do traditional music, which is the song lines. And the song lines are fascinating. The song lines are an oral tradition that is passed down from generation to generation. And the song line is a song that is a map. So the song is a description of a path of travel. And it will start at one point, and its directions, and it's that song is how you remember where there are dangerous crocodiles, and where there are watering holes, and where other villages are. And so by memorizing these songs, you don't get lost. And so every village, they have public songs that they share, and that uh, they'll sing to anyone, and they share multiple songs with the neighboring villages that describe the same path. They also have their secret songs that are very private and their own, and even within the tribe, only specific people get to learn them. But these songlines create a web that actually cover all of Australia. So they can travel if they meet people from other tribes, they can get the song line to go to another place, continue their travel. So it's very fascinating. In fact, these song lines are extremely accurate and important. And as part of how they were able to lay claim to an island that in they've got a 10,000 plus year history on in Australia. And that when they first settled there, the oceans were lower. And they have, the government, they ended up winning the court case to gain possession of this island because they said they had an ancient right, and they had, they had rock art there, but then the government claimed that, well, the rock art could have been just by nomadic people that were traveling through the area. Maybe it wasn't your ancestors, maybe it was someone else's ancestors. But they were able to illustrate with their song lines that they would walk to this island, and the island, there was no way to walk to the island. They actually took submarine, went through, and they had to take the bathymetry, and then they compared the song lines to the bathymetry, and were able to prove that that song line did indeed walk them to the island when the oceans were lower. So really fascinating stories there. So they've got a lot of amazing stories to tell. This is some of the artwork just in the village, and some of the space they had for creating this. So taught them about photogrammetry, and we went out to an island there that is where their mythology is that they originated from this island. Their people came out of this island. So you can see here, this island, this is an image from the top of the island. And the sand going to the beach, that's only available during low tide. So this is another island that you can walk to, but only sometimes. So here are some views of that. We went out and we did panoramic photography and photogrammetry there, and captured the island so that they could tell their origin story. And let's see if we can maybe show some of the basics of the model here. So this is all available on the web here. So just this is very simple and rudimentary, but this was kind of how we captured that specific island. So it was drone photogrammetry and ground-based photogrammetry. And what kind of brought all of this up was that I contacted them, because it's been years now, and I was like, recently I contacted them, like, has anything come of our trainings? And they said, we haven't created lots of VR projects, but what we have done is a lot of projection mapping, and we've been doing artwork with projection mapping. So this is some of their art, and I was so impressed. I thought it came out so beautifully. So this is some of their Vimeos of that. I'll put links to this stuff in the comments, but just want to share. I'll just quickly scrub through that for time's sake, because I know we're already almost approaching an hour.
Greg, if you go over an hour, I don't think too many people will object. This is all fascinating.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, I know some people, their lives are scheduled in hour increments, so I'd like to respect that. But this was done obviously as a live performance. I just wanted to share some of the transitions that they made through the space and how. So this is all still using, kind of that 3D understanding, and works in real-time engines. And then let's see, there's one other piece here that we got a little bit for. So I just thought it was exciting how they used the different elements and the ways that they artistically put together the 3D and art in reference to the, an ancient culture and reflecting some of their stories and mixing all these different types of media together. It's very clever work. So I was excited to see how much they were able to gain from this. So lastly, this last project is one that we did with the Navajo, and it was called Pull of the Moon. And this was another kind of approach to documentary. It was done in Coyote Canyon, and Eric and I on this project, and it was documenting the collaboration between two artists, between a very famous and well-known ceramicist named Ai Weiwei. He's Chinese, and a Navajo artist named Bert Bernali, who did both music and for the piece and this mandala, this fire mandala. So on the left there, we've got Ai Weiwei's contribution, and on the right, we have Bert Bernali's. So Ai Weiwei's piece was a mandala that they took coal that was found on the site, and they put the black background of coal, and then he used smashed ceramics for the bicycles, because he always thought of the bicycle as one of the symbols of China's ascent, as it came out of an ancient culture into the modern world. So he made his mandala from bicycle patterns. So he did cutouts and plywood and sent those to sprinkle the ceramics into the coal. The fire piece was just dug fire and then rope soaked in kerosene. And in the center and on the four corners, there were urns. The center urn was probably an 8-foot tall urn, stuffed with straw. And in the center of that, he had sculpted and welded this really beautiful cornstalk. So the fire would burn, heat the center cornstalk up, and then when the urn fell away, there would be this glowing cornstalk. And each of the four corners of his mandala had different representations and symbology of the seasons. So this was a live art piece. It was in a super remote location, and only the people who were there that night got to see it. So it was a small audience. Maybe there might have been 50 or 100 people there. But the artwork was supposed to be made out of things from the earth that just wind and time would wash it away. So it was not meant to be a permanent installation. And this is a project that Eric and Hansen and I partnered in. So we had a company together called X-Res Studio from 2006 to 2018. And now we are each running our own separate companies and occasionally collaborating on projects as well. So we still have several projects we work on together, but this was one of the ones we did when we had X-Res Studio. Here on the left, we've got Ai Weiwei, And on the right, we have Bert Benally with his artwork. And here we can see a little bit of the construction of the two pieces. And we all stood up and viewed it from this cliff face. And this is, so one of the things that I did when when it was live is I shot video from the top. It was far enough away that mono worked fine, but just shot normal framed video that I used as an inset for the piece. And so I marked I actually set the position in advance, and in advance of the piece, I shot a spherical panorama from that exact position so that I could embed the video from the exact same perspective. So I did a couple of tricky things with that in the photogrammetry. The piece that we made was called Full of the Moon, and it starts off inside a hogan, which is a traditional structure that Navajo and lots of other native people used. Here's some images of it from the left. So we did photogrammetry of both the interior and the exterior of a hogan. And the hogan was actually, I believe, in Window Rock. Coyote Canyon was in New Mexico. This is ancient Navajo land, private land. That has a very long history. It's where the cavalry actually came and gathered up the Navajo and took them on a death march, basically across the country, and stole their land, which they eventually regained. This is an image from the piece. So we've done lots of set extension with this. So we did aerial photogrammetry. I flew a drone over the place during the day. We then, Eric integrated this with GIS data with height maps of the terrain. And then we photographed and filmed skies, and he integrated storms, distant storms into those skies. So we went out to the location and camped out there and got to spend an evening with some interesting folks, a couple of interesting Navajo folks telling us a lot about growing up in the Native American church and what their life was like. And you can see behind there the canyon walls that we stood up on to watch the piece in the evening from. We also photographed lots of skies, filming them using fisheye lenses. Here's the areas that we were up on top of. And this is the panorama that I shot. On the left there is where the artwork was going to occur. So we did 2 trips out there, one in advance where we did the aerial photogrammetry, and we did day for night. So obviously you can't do drone shoots at night and get a really clean image. So we shot it during the day, and then we day for night processing on the final result. We also did the same for the skies. This is a little of the photogrammetry. Now, what was interesting, you can't quite see it here, but I actually had to redo this because I had trouble with my licenses. I didn't do this in reality capture. This was done in Agisoft before it was called Metashape, but it was the Agisoft software. But we included in this photos from where I shot the panorama from and where I would shoot the video from. So that was part of the calibration, so that when we did a camera move, we had that spot exactly. So what we would do is fly around the photogrammetry model that's integrated with the GIS data, with the digital elevation models, and then we could land inside the view of the live video that we shot, and then dovetail that into the photogrammetric scene. This is just a model with a little more texture. And finally, this is something you can view. I recommend watching it in headset. It's so much more fun in headset, but let's just take a quick look at this. See, I forgot the length of this. So this is on Vimeo. I've got this as a panning movie, so you can view it. And this is Burt Bernali's music playing in the background. And we used X-Frog plants for all the foliage plants in the environment. I'm going to tilt this down just a little bit so you can get a better view. So now we've got the video integrated into the 3D scene. And because, this process took about an hour, I took some liberties and basically overlaid video from different parts of the timeline and would kind of stack them and then slowly dissolve between them to represent the change that took place over time. And one of the results is that the guys tending the fire tended to look like ghosts as a result of this, which was kind of a fun artifact that we were happy with. And so we end up here ending on the sunrise. So let's see, I believe Oliver Haraldson also worked on this, as I remember. I think he was there with us for that project. So anyways, that's my presentation. I'm happy to stick around and take questions if anyone has them.
There we go. Okay. Yes, there were several that were asked during the presentation, and I encourage people to add their questions now. Something that Natalie asked early on, besides issues of control of representation, what kinds of biases do these technologies bring to Indigenous cultures or representation of Indigenous cultures?
That's kind of an interesting question. Like, what kind of biases? Well, there are biases in that they're good at filming certain types of things and not, or ways in which the media itself can represent things. And those are the same. You would have a similar problem if you were talking about filming and video or written storytelling or whatever media you choose. Like, there are embedded biases about what's going to work well and what's not. So that would be probably the way to look at it. Mostly people are very excited because they feel that it's more representative of their culture, that they are they feel like the sky is really important, and that the sky never gets a fair shake in normal video. There's I've heard lots of comments like that they actually find it very natural and closer to their uh, worldview and perspective to have something that where they can look anywhere they want, and that the sky, I've heard the sky is open for multiple cultures, about how that's really important. And um, uh, so there's a practice called dream time, but at the Yirrkala practice, where they um, it's like the idea of astral projection. They believe that they really, while they sleep and they dream, that they fly the song lines. So in their dreams, they fly over the terrain that they have song lines about, and to them, this is what virtual reality felt like. They're like, this is like, oh, this is song lines. This is dream time that we're experiencing here. So that was like, there was interesting feedback about that, where they felt like these new media types could better tell their stories, and they could better express what it's really like for them. Um, so those are very positive ways in which the media be different. Other biases, I would say, like, it's not so much biases, but the media does have limitations in like what you can capture and how you can capture it. Like not having telephoto lenses like you do in traditional film, where you can get really far away and just kind of have be that fly in the wall that's kind of unobserved, where people are not self-conscious about cameras and that sort of thing. That's a lot harder to do. Um, Anyways, any other questions or comments?
Oh, plenty, but maybe something similar to that. You are exploring or representing a lot of indigenous cultures
Mhm.
with their heritage from way back, but way before Western contact. But of
Yeah.
course, all of them, even the most isolated in the Amazon, have a lot of modern contact, well, modern technology, modern knowledge.
Yeah.
How do how do you approach that? Do you say, well, let's, try to represent this as close to what it used to be back in ancient times? Or do you say, we'll represent the way it is now, and maybe you'll have Western dress, have eyeglasses, various other things that wouldn't fit with ancient representation, but maybe it is representative of the experience now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that sometimes there is utility in isolating uh, what is interesting, exciting, and different about the culture. Like, I don't totally shy away from that, but my rule of thumb when actually creating pieces, like when other people make those choices, I'm not offended by that. But really, I feel like it's up to the people. You put the choice of what you want to share about your culture that's modern, and what you want to share about your culture that's traditional, is up to the people that are being represented. I feel like that's the real question. I think there's kind of the fetishization of um, of culture, and it being this pristine, untouched world, which is, it's not accurate. But at the same time, you could also argue that you're showing what's unique and interesting about the culture. But I think it's important to recognize that all of these people, they are both. They are both, an ancient culture and a modern culture, and it's really, I feel like it's important to let it be up to them, which how they represent that.
Yeah. Another question. So, with so many, when shooting, with so many different technologies on projects with very limited time on location, especially with limited AC power available, how are you shifting from one to another and prioritizing each without losing focus on the actual stories you're trying to tell? It's easy to become overwhelmed by the equipment and its maintenance on location when you're trying to do so much. Oh, I can relate to that.
Yeah, maniacally. That's how you you just. Um, I don't know. I think that there's some personalities that can deal with that and doing problem solving while under pressure. Um, and you add to that like all the environmental factors. You're also overheating yourself as well as all of your equipment overheating, and like there it is tricky and difficult, and you just I get through it because of the excitement about the project and because I can envision the result, and that gets me so excited. I get excited about the ideas, I get excited about what's going on in front of me and thinking of the best way to capture it and the best technology and perspective and ways that I can leverage and find kind of interesting juxtapositions that I can in post like align and put together. So I get excited about stuff like that. But yeah, it's extremely difficult when you're dealing with those conditions.
And that I have found is true even when you go back to just doing still photography, trying to
Yeah.
represent whatever it is you're trying to uh,
Yeah.
relate. By the way, anyone who wants to ask a question, verbally, simply click the raise your hand button. I think next to, well, somewhere down there on the bottom. And then I'll just open up your microphone so that you can ask verbally rather than type the whole thing out.
Oh, I see that was Scott Heighton asking. Hey, Scott.
Yay. Okay, see. Then Emily asks, incredible contribution to the field, Greg. Amazing stuff. Couple of questions. Did the tribes you were working with want to keep any of the raw assets as heritage documentation, or was that ever discussed? And was it clear from the beginning that these were nonprofit projects, or did you have to navigate any ownership questions with the film subjects?
That all depends on which project you're talking about. Um, on the Awavena project, the chief and his wife were both producers on the project. Uh, they were deeply involved in the storytelling, and they invited Lynette to come in and create the film. So, um, there's never really been any monetization of that film. It traveled uh, the festival circuit, and it's used at Davos to show to world leaders and stuff like that. But it never there was no profit ever made from that. The Yirrkala were capturing their own assets. They have their own media lab there, so they were definitely capturing and owning their own assets. I shot a couple of things, but it never really went into anything. And uh, with the Navajo project, that was funded by a grant, so there hasn't been any monetization after that. It's just kind of posted for free. So largely, these questions of ownership haven't really come up uh, because there hasn't been a clear monetization or and the other thing is that largely we're co-authoring with these people. Like we may know the tools, but it's their stories. So we're trying to help them tell their stories and involve them in the storytelling process. And maybe Lynette has a deep background as an amazing filmmaker, so she she brings that, and we bring technology, but it's their stories, and I think it's important to have those communities involved in the creation and the storytelling and all of those aspects. And as far as ownership goes, that can be negotiated, just as you would negotiate with anyone else.
Okay. Um, Alexia asked, how do you keep up with the changing presentation technologies? I think a great example is the Awavena, using viewport and having to download specific codecs and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. It was really designed more around location-based installation.
Okay.
So that was the principal output, was for decision makers and Davos. So there are a lot of things that were different when it was presented in so now you can experience it, and it was kind of after it was created. Mars went through and he actually made a separate version for publication and distribution. But if you saw it in the festivals, there's a physical book in front of you. And you start with a physical book. It's using the pass through of the Vive pass through camera so that you can see this book in front of you, open it, and then you get an overlay of graphics on top of that. And then it goes back and forth between reality, kind of the mixed reality to virtual reality. And then it goes back at the end. There was another thing where you get up and there'd be butterflies that you would walk through. And then there'd be a phone app as well. And if you bought one of the beaded sleeves, like I think I've got one here. Like, they would do these really beautiful beaded armbands, and they did an app with I think it was called Blipbar was the service. So you would have AR where you'd use your phone and you'd see one of the butterflies would land. It would be on your arm. So there was all these layers of media that came out as part of the experience. So that was a very different type of installation. So I actually have a bigger problem with just getting PowerPoint to work right. Zoom and PowerPoint to me seems like a bigger struggle than these other fun technologies that we get to integrate.
Okay, I can relate to that too a little bit. See, so you gave us some indication how to view the Awavena video. The which one was it? The projection one? That was the Navajo, I believe. No, that was
It's a
Australian.
Yirrkala. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I had those up on screen, I think, but I'll just let me see. I'll pull up my PowerPoint again. I'll paste those into the chat here so that you guys can
Great.
check this stuff out. So we've got we also have the one that's on Vimeo that you can view in a headset, Pull of the Moon. So let me see if I can. This is Pull of the Moon. We wanted the video for these two pieces here. And these are the Yirrkala. put in a link for. Let's see, Awavena. Here we are. This is Awavena.
Okay. Would you mind just repeating how you could watch the Awavena, for instance, in a quest, and perhaps we can give a little bit more detailed written description in
Yeah,
on-demand.
sure. Yeah, we could maybe put in at least a link to. So if you've got a Quest, if that's a VR headset you got, you get a link cable, which is like, you know,
You can just do it as an air link as long as you have
yeah,
Steam.
you can use AirLink as well. I always use the cable because it seems a little more reliable. But yeah, you turn on the link. You have to have a PC with an NVIDIA GTX card. So any NVIDIA card that came out in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so. And then you have to just set up Link on the computer, and then set it up on install Link, which installs the Oculus software on the computer. And then you have to turn on Link in the settings in your headset. Be on the same, if you're on Wi-Fi, you got to be on the same Wi-Fi network. It's got to be a pretty fast Wi-Fi. If it's not, you want to switch to the link cable. Or if you have a lot on your Wi-Fi, it can cause problems. Like if you've got your stuff all over your house on it, you want to use a link cable. And then you turn both those on, and then the last thing you have to do is you have to install Steam and Steam VR. So it uses like all these different pieces of software, but shockingly, these do all work together, and it actually is not as hard as you would imagine. And once you have that, then you install Viveport. And once you install Viveport, you can then install Awavena and install the little video decompressor, and then it's all downhill.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in reality, that whole process is probably like less than 15 minutes of.
It's actually very easy to set up the Quest link.
Yeah, it's easier than it sounds.
Right. You've been using a lot of equipment for an awful long time, and seeing that Nokia camera in the Amazon, it's like that's ancient technology today.
Yeah, for sure.
If you were to, put together your ideal setup right now for doing VR film capture, what would it probably be?
That's an assessment I make on every single project, and usually involves lots of research. I was just hanging out with the guys from the Meta Camera group, which is not Meta like Facebook.
Oh yeah,
Meta.
yeah.
But they've got I've used their camera, their 12.5K camera, for a bunch of background plates for virtual production that we were shooting, car background plates. We did a library of all of Los Angeles and Vegas and different places. I was really impressed by the quality, especially in low light, stuff like that. It performed really well. So he has a new version that will shoot stereo. It's got 8 lenses. That would be a fantastic camera to use. So that would be really interesting.
Okay.
But there are others too. I would definitely research all of it. I think those ME20s are probably still what I would use for low light, for extreme low light.
Mhm.
And I thought those were very impressive, beautiful, clean images off from that. It's really nice.
All right, one quick question. When you are filming, this goes back more to the Amazon. Those I assume were all static camera positions.
Yes.
What would you do when you want to have a moving camera position?
I wouldn't do it.
Okay,
No, there are, you can move in VR, and there are ways, but you have to be so cautious and conservative with movement just due to nausea. You know, if you've got some kind of frame around the camera, that some kind of point of reference that's static. We did a lot. We actually do move the camera in Awavena quite a bit, but the when you're going through all the point clouds, there's camera movement.
oh, sure.
And the way that we made that work was that because initially we did it and it was as anticipated, super nauseating. But what we did was we put a star pattern behind the point cloud, so a bunch of static points, and that actually gives your eyes enough to hold on to that it doesn't give you the motion sickness. So there's there's always things that you can do to kind of add that if you need to move the camera. But I mostly don't do that. I've done it on wire before, like you can do it on wire. That's kind of interesting. But really you just want to avoid anything where there's inertia involved. So you don't want to go around a curve, you don't want to accelerate, you don't want to decelerate, you want the movement to be just like at a constant rate. You don't want to go up or down or left or right, you just go straight. Yeah, there's I mean there's dozens of solutions of cars and moving tripods and other ways to move the camera.
I dare say a lot of experimentation is necessary to really get the feel for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we should wrap it up. If there are any other questions, please ask now. Doesn't appear. Okay. Greg, this has truly been fascinating. As much as I gained, watching this in a live version, I think I will have to watch it again to pick up a lot of the nuances. Again, this will be available in the next couple of days on demand. Email will go out to everybody. If you are a member, you'll be able to watch the whole thing. We'll have links to the videos and hopefully a little bit discussion or written instructions on how to do the quest link and all that.
We really appreciate this, Greg.
We very, very much do. This, like I said, this is a presentation I've been looking forward to for a long time.
Great. All right. Well, thank you guys.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.